everyone, welcome to lecture 3 in the series. So this is when we're going to start bringing everything together from the previous lectures, all the knowledge. So hopefully this is when things start to feel real, and in practice, in business, in the real world, it's also when people tend to start making mistakes. So what are we talking about today? Well, we're going through transactions and legal events, right? Okay, so everyone is doing transactions in business, so we're going to break it down. Transactions and legal events. All right, so to start, we're going to recap from the previous lectures. Again, if you haven't watched the previous lectures, please do. They build on each other, so it will be difficult to follow if you haven't kept up. You can also read the Substack notes, they're super brief. But to briefly go over it, right? What we call ownership, or what people generally call ownership, what lay people generally call ownership, is actually title, ownership, benefit, and control. It's a bundle of 3 things, right? That's it. And the law lets you unbundle and separate out ownership, benefit, and control, or title, economic enjoyment, and decision-making power. You can unbundle and you can separate it out to different kinds of economic actors. Broadly, the law recognizes just 2 types of broad economic actors. They are natural persons, abbreviated here, NP, and legal persons, right? Okay, just 2 types of economic actors you can unbundle. Title, benefit, and control, or title, enjoyment, and decisions between 2 types of economic actors. Natural persons, which is just human beings, like you, and legal persons, so companies and foundations, for example, right? And then we also have things like trusts and partnerships, which are not legal persons strictly, they are legal relationships is the best way to understand them. So you've got companies and foundations as legal persons, and then you've got partnerships and trusts, right, as relationships. All of these, for practical purposes, remember, we're not training law students, we're teaching business people the practical aspects of business law. So, for all intents and purposes, these are just the tools in your legal toolkit. They're the tools that you will use to do business. They are not plans, they are tools, and they are not ends in themselves, right? Okay, so once you start making money, you will need to change stuff. You'll need to restructure. You'll need to move assets, or you'll need to buy assets, sell assets, borrow against assets, etc. All of these are called transactions. You're doing transactions. This is what business is according to the law. It's doing transactions. That's it, right? So today we're going to go through a basic common type of transaction, just one, and then from that you'll get the idea from that example how the law feels about transactions broadly. And if you understand the principles of this very simple basic transaction, then you'll be able to reason through all kinds of transactions as a business person with your legal professionals. All right, so the type of transaction that we're going to do as an example is a share transfer, right? So abbreviated to share transfer agreement, right? It's a transfer of shares. You're probably familiar with this and it sounds easy, right? But even though everyone's probably heard of it, there's a lot of legal nuance and a lot of aspects to a seemingly simple transaction like a share transfer agreement, all right? You can't just move shares around. The law sees transactions. It doesn't see moving stuff around. So, what are transactions? We've said the word transactions a lot, okay? Well, Transactions are nothing more than a series or chain, a chronological chain of legal events. So, I've got here a transaction, get rid of the review here. That's it. Transactions you can think of as nothing more than a chain of legal events when it comes to the law. So you've got event 1, and then you've got event 2, and then 3. It is a transaction is a chronological chain of legal events, right? Okay. If you've ever done any computer programming or software engineering, you can think of business law like a state machine or like a computer. It's exactly the same. Your business is a computer. You're not in the computer business. That's not what I'm saying. Although you might be, I don't know, you could be in the computer business. That's not the point. What I'm saying in terms of this analogy is that your business you can think of as a computer, right? So legal events are commands that you give to change the legal reality of your business. Once a legal event happens, right, the state changes, right, like with a computer, but there's no reset button. Okay, so you don't sort of change a computer's state in programming. You execute a command and then the state changes. So in the same way, you'll execute a command to your lawyer and the state of your business will change. That's a transaction, right? But you have to make the command to the lawyer, right? So before the command runs, you can think of your business as in some steady state, system A or state A, and then you issue the command to the lawyer runs the command, legal events run in a chronological chain, and then the system's in some new state, call it state B. So there's no halfway, right? And you can't say, I didn't mean to. It's like running code. It will just execute. All right. So a legal event is like executing a command on a computer. That's going to be the analogy that will help us think through everything. And that's how you should reason through all of it when you're dealing with your legal professionals. The computer in this analogy is your business, right? All right, so we're going to run through a basic share transfer command on your business. And it's exactly like running code on your computer. Once it executes, the downstream logic of your business will behave differently. So you don't want to run code for the first time in production on live assets, right? You test code first. That's why we slow down before we execute legal events or before we send a command for our lawyer to execute legal events, right? We slow down. We test the code first. We're going to give you a basic checklist for testing your code, so to say. That's on the Substack. Again, all free. Go and check it out if it pleases you. So structuring wealth is about doing transactions. That's how the law views it, right? And transactions are like initiating irreversible code on your business. That's our mental frame for this lecture. Each command that you give, right, creates new legal events, moves your business to a new legal state. I think you're getting the idea, right? So we're going to set up, let's set up our example, right? It's going to be a basic state. You're going to have a trust, you're going to have a holding company, trust, and we'll have a operating company, right? Okay, operating company here, and then you, natural person. That's you, stickman. Russian oligarch is back. There he is. He's happy he's an oligarch. Okay, so here we have 4 economic actors. We've got a trust, one of the tools in our legal toolkit. We'll put this in, and we'll put it in Jersey. There's a lot of trusts in Jersey, right? So we've got a trust, it's in Jersey. Okay, then we've got HC, that's a holding company, right? This is a company. It's a separate legal person. It's one of the tools in your toolkit. Watch the previous lectures. And this is in the Netherlands, we'll say. It's a Dutch holding company, all right? Just an example, guys. And then you've got an operating company. We'll make this German. It's a GmbH. Why not? Okay, and this is your e-commerce business, right? Okay, you sell, I don't know, you sell dildos on Amazon or something, who knows, right? But this is your e-commerce operating business. This is you're a natural person. So we've got 4 economic actors here. We've got 2 companies, 1 trust, and a natural person, right? This is the e-commerce business. For the purposes of this example, we're going to have the trust owning the holding company already. So before this was all set up, and the trust owns the holding company already, that's set up, okay? The transaction, the share transfer we're going to do is from the e-commerce operating business, selling dildos on Amazon, to the Dutch holding company, right? Now, ownership, control, and benefit, always, okay? And ownership, control, and benefit. So this e-commerce business is yours. You set it up a few years ago, you've done really well, and it's all yours. So you've got title, the shares are all in your name, right? So you've got title, you've got control, you're the sole director, and you've got benefit, right? You own this e-commerce business, and now you've grown it, and you want to move it into a holding company structure for family planning, let's say. So you're going to do the share transfer to the holding company, right? So this is the state. This is the initial state of our transaction. 4 separate economic actors, 3 different types. We've got 2 companies, 1 trust and 1 natural person, your company, and you're going to transfer it to this holding structure for your family planning. That's it, all right? Everything exists, nothing's happened yet, right? No legal reality has changed. We don't have any legal events yet. This is the starting state, right? So all you've done is you've made a decision to transfer the shares. That's it, right? No legal event has happened yet. You're just planning. You've made a decision. This does not trigger any events, right? It's just planning. Planning is not a legal event. Doesn't cause a state change. All right, so what's the next step? Well, you get a valuation. That's required. So put here valuation. That would be the next step. Okay, so you need to get a valuation on your successful German e-commerce business selling dildos on Amazon. You need to value it, right? That is still not a legal event. Getting a valuation or getting many valuations is just planning. It's still not a legal event, right? Valuation is still very much planning. All right, so why do you need to get a valuation? Why does it matter? Why is it important? Why are you doing it as the next step? All right, it's not a formality. It's how the law and tax authorities are going to anchor the transaction to reality. All right? So you need a valuation to essentially answer one single question, which is, what is this e-commerce business worth at the moment the first legal event takes place? The law will care about that first moment, and that first moment will have a value attached to this. All right, so valuation fixes the first event in time. So every transaction is transferring or dealing with something, if not transferring, then dealing with something of value, right? So it needs a number attached to it. Even if there's no cash changing hands, 0 is still a number, right? So if you do not do your own valuation, someone else is going to do it and attach it later for you. Authorities will do it if it comes down to it. They'll just substitute it in. They'll substitute in their own number, and you will not like this number. So, general rule then. Once you have your initial state, you make the decision that you're going to do a transaction. A decision is not a legal event. You then need a valuation for the thing that is the subject of the transaction. Again, getting a valuation is just planning, still no legal events, right? So what's the rule? If you're moving value, you must measure it. That's why you get a valuation. All right, that's enough about valuation, right? So let's get into the first legal event, right? The first state change, all right? So that's going to be, simply, it's going to be the share transfer agreement is signed, all right? So drawing up the share transfer agreement, negotiating the share transfer agreement, those are not legal events. They're just planning. The first legal event is taking the share transfer agreement and having both parties sign it, because now you have a binding contract. This will probably feel familiar to anybody who's bought a house. Say it's a very common type of transaction that people do in their lives. What we're doing is we're making you look at what you already did in a new light and understanding what was happening from a legal perspective fundamentally. So when you do future transactions in your business that are more complicated, then you will understand how to reason through it with your lawyers. So you've got the first legal event. Share transfer agreement is signed, right? Okay, that's the legal event. This is going to fix the parties. It will fix the valuation. Now the valuation matters. Before getting the valuation was planning, but locking it and signing it in a contract now means that it is locked in. It matters now. Obligations are going to exist now, even if the ownership has not been transferred. Signing it is not going to transfer ownership most times straight away. There will be other legal events. Okay? So you have your first legal event. So why does this legal event matter? So you move from planning to intention, and then from intention to action. This is action. This is a legal event. Planning, intention are not legal events. This is when stuff becomes legally enforceable. This is when the valuation is fixed and authorities are going to start using dates. This is the first date that they will use, right? So, event number 2. In a basic share transfer, maybe it's going to be, we'll call it payment, all right? Let's keep it simple. So, it's going to have to be some payment, let's say. All right, so maybe there's some approvals too. So, but let's call it payment, right? So payment's going to be the second legal event, right? And the reason it is a legal event is because failure to make payment can trigger consequences, right? So what's the next legal event? Well, you're probably going to get some register updates. So let's call it register updates. So ownership will change, title will change, control will change, benefit, economic enjoyment will change. Remember, he's transferring the shares into this structure to distance himself from it as family planning so he can go off and do other things, right? So he's not going to be on title, certainly. He's not going to have control, and he doesn't want to have benefit also. He's transferring it. So there'll be register updates for all those things. And we'll go through how ownership, control, and benefit change for this transaction in a moment. But the next legal event will be all the register updates for that. All right, so this is going to perfect the transfer, basically. And yeah, change title, change control, and change benefit. And you're going to see all third parties start to recognize the new title holder, the new controllers, and the new beneficiaries. All right, so why is this event important? Well, mainly because this is where you get the change, official change in ownership, control, and benefit, right? All right, you know what, let's do it. Let's change the ownership, control, and benefit. All right, so here, before, if we go through each business, you've got your operating company, e-commerce business, dildos on Amazon. Right, here he is. 100% title holder, 100% control, sole director, and sole beneficiary, right? Now how does it change? Who or what owns the e-commerce business now? Right? Well, title is with the holding company, with the Dutch holding company. Who controls it, right? Well, the board at the Dutch holding company, right? And then who benefits from it? Well, the beneficiary is the shareholders of the Dutch holding company, right? Okay, so it's all the Dutch holding company now. For this e-commerce business, it's correct to say that the title is with the Dutch holding company, the control is with the board of the Dutch holding company, shared with the new board or the new director of the e-commerce business, right? So depending on the internal agreements and how it's shared. But you could say both that control is with the new board and the new director or directors at the e-commerce business, and also control here, right? But let's keep it first layer actually. And we'll just say control stays here with the operating company and the new board. And then you've got benefit. Who are the beneficiaries at one layer? It's the Dutch holding company, right? The ultimate beneficiaries come through here. But to keep it simple, this business, title is clearly with the Dutch holding company. Control of this business is with the new board of the e-commerce company. And the benefit is with the Dutch holding company. All right, let's move on to the Dutch holding company. Where is title of the Dutch holding company? Is it with the trust? No, trusts are not legal persons. They can't own assets in their own name. A trust is a relationship. Again, please go and watch the previous lecture. It'll all make sense there, I promise. But title is with the trustee. So in a trust, it is the trustee that takes title. So the trustee takes title. Who controls the Dutch holding company? Well, the board of directors of the Dutch holding company, right? And then who benefits from the Dutch holding company? The shareholders of the Dutch holding company benefit. So who's the shareholders of who is the shareholder of the Dutch holding company, right? Well, it's the trustee of the Dutch holding company, right? Okay, as trustee for the beneficiaries, right? But it is the trustee as trustee for the beneficiaries. Okay, let's go to the trust. Who owns the trust, right? Trusts don't really have an owner, remember? They break the chain. So they divide up the O, again, in the previous lecture, into ultimate beneficial owner and title holder. So the trust, the title holder is the trustee. The ultimate beneficial owner is the beneficiaries of the trust. Who controls the trust? The trustee. And who benefits from the trust? The beneficiaries, right? So that's the new state at the end of the third legal event, which is the register update. Okay, so now you're at a new persistent state for your computer. And then we've got event 4. So this is, you might have to do some tax filings, almost certainly. General paperwork and filings here. A lot of them will be legal events. You might have to do some corporate disclosures, some disclosures to authorities and things like that. Again, we're keeping it really simple just to illustrate a point. So you can call it broadly filings and disclosures. And failing to report's a separate issue. Again, this is just an example, right? So why is the law going to go and separate transactions into legal events? Why does it do that? Remember, a transaction is nothing more than a chronological set of legal events. So why does the law do this, right? Because different rules are going to attach to different legal events, okay? So, really important. The events have to come in sequence. They're a chain of events, a cascading chain of events. So you make a decision to do a share transfer. Then you do some planning. Then you talk to your lawyer. Then you issue the command to your lawyer. Your lawyer then sets about initiating chronological legal events to move from the state where your e-commerce business was owned by you and controlled by you and you were the sole beneficiary. And these legal events run one after the other until you move fully to the new state, which is the new division of ownership, benefit, and control between your four economic actors here, right? Disputes will often turn on timing. So the law is going to care about the sequence, all right? So probably from your perspective, generally we notice with business people is that this share transfer agreement and all this feels like it's one thing, like a single action. But legally, it's a chain of irreversible steps. And once you start it, it cannot be easily unwound. All right, so a core rule here, guys. A transaction is a sequence of legal events that change the legal reality of your business. Each step, each legal event is time-stamped and has implications. It's not just paperwork. Remember, again, from the previous lectures, authorities do not stop at diagrams. Authorities look through the structure. They look through the structure to see what's actually going on. If reality contradicts, then if reality contradicts, let's call it paperwork, then reality is going to win. All right, so who's really making decisions? Who controls timing? Who can move money? Who can say yes or no, right? These are the kinds of things that the law cares about, not diagrams. Yes, our founder here can stay involved. You can stay involved. It's normal. Sometimes it's expected. Sometimes people want to. But in our example, he did not want to. So control is different from involvement. All right? Control means directing outcomes. If you want to be involved, unlike our stickman founder here, and you want to be part of your own trust, for example, that's fine. But, this is an important but, if your goal is separation, right? If your goal is things like asset protection, for example, you can't be involved in decision making after the transaction runs. Protection almost always requires distance. Again, if you want involvement, it's fine, it's up to you. But understand, there is generally a trade-off between involvement and protection. So protection will be reduced. There is no free lunch. There is no perfect structure. Only trade-offs. You must choose with intention. So you can be involved or you can be protected. You cannot fully be both. All right, I think I drilled that home enough. They're very important. So, core lesson. What's the core lesson from today's lecture? Well, what one business person typically sees as a single thing, as a share transfer or as a restructuring, as one thing, the law sees as a chain of legal events, a chain of irreversible legal events, right? So, how do we do this properly? Well, I think that we're going to run through a mental model, right? That's probably the best way to do it. So we'll do a mental model of how you can think about transactions generally in the planning stage. This is not legal advice, guys. It's just how you can broadly enter a transaction and how you can switch your thinking and your mindset as you're about to enter important transactions with your legal professionals. So, really important. You want to model the end state first, right? What are you trying to accomplish? Model the end state mentally first. Map out all of the legal events broadly. They don't have to be specific. Just lay out the legal events that are going to be required to get to your end state. Then assume every event is taxable because it's the 21st century. And then you have that laid out, and then you can think about optimizing, right? That's the mindset you need to get into as you're starting to do transactions. It's how you should think about executing a transaction, step by step. All right, again, we'll put this on Substack as a guide, as a mental model, and then you can have it and have a look at it again. So, important, first off, in your mental model, why am I doing this transaction? What problem am I trying to solve? Is there even a problem I'm trying to solve? What should the end state look like before I start? All right, then who has, at the end state, who has ownership, right? Control and benefit in my modeled ideal end state. Who has ownership? Who has control? Who has benefit? Where is title, right? Then ask yourself, have the assets been valued? When were they last valued? Has that value changed likely since the last valuation? And can my lawyers and accountants defend whatever valuation we're intending or likely to put on the subject matter of the transaction, right? Then at that point, you would check in with your tax advisors. You'd ask which taxes could be triggered: capital gains tax, withholding tax, stamps duty, transfer taxes, etc., etc. The list goes on and on. Welcome to the 21st century. So remember, this is all part of the planning stage. There's no legal events. You're now moving into a transaction mindset and you're planning before any legal events are taken. All right, then you want to start to think about jurisdiction at this point. In step 5, I guess we're at. Which jurisdictions are involved? Do tax treaties exist between them? Where could double taxation potentially arise, right? And then step 6, you want to go and check decisional authority in the different economic actors that will be party to the transaction. Write out the economic actors simply, and then ask yourself, who has authority to sign? Are any approvals required? Is anyone currently acting outside their authority? All right, then take a deep breath, take a step back, and then remind yourself that sequence matters. Think what must happen first and what cannot happen before completion. And is the order I'm roughly thinking in correct? All right. So again, that's all going to be laid out on Substack because it's an important checklist and mental model to internalize, right? So, final takeaway. The law does not think in structures, right? It does not think that way. It might surprise, it often surprises a lot of people to hear that. The law does not think in structures. The law thinks in transactions and legal events, right? You're in business now. So guess what? You're doing transactions. The more successful you become, hopefully, the more transactions you will do. As you grow, these transactions will become more complicated, but foundationally, in essence, they will always be the same. A transaction is nothing more than a series of legal events. Your business is like a computer, and you are executing commands when you are doing transactions, right? Those commands trigger legal events, and then the events change the state of your business forever. Thank you.